Oh, good morning. Welcome. Hope everybody will start the week off here. Let's see. Looks like Ian, OPD is first on the list. Okay.
I'm talk about your financials first.
Sure.
Okay, Kathy Funk Baxter, Finance Director. And we have the financials for Office of Public Defense. And this is through August 12th. For revenues, they are part of the general fund. So most of their source of funding is from the general fund as opposed to other revenues. And so they have a intergovernmental, which has already exceeded budget. It's at 160,182. So we'll be amending the budget to get us through the rest of the year on that. And then goods and services, their budget is at 50,000. They're currently at $11,738. So a little bit behind or a trend line, but we'll be monitoring that. It's not material. And then other financing sources, I believe, is their reimbursement through the mental health tax, I believe, that they receive a small portion of that.
Would you repeat that, please?
Their other financing sources is a transfer in related to their mental health tax. That they get a small amount of reimbursement. And that's lagging just a little bit, but there's a delay in doing those billings. Any other questions on revenues? And we haven't had a chance to explore looking at how to show the transfer in from general fund. On the expense side.
Excuse me, I did want to ask about the intergovernmental, which is over budget. I'm assuming that is a grant from the state that comes in once a year or so?
I believe that's, they turn in reimbursement related transactions for that. Correct, Ian?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. So that's ongoing. It's not one particular.
Yeah. Okay.
That's why I'll need to amend it to account for the rest of the year.
Okay.
Okay, on expenses.
Although there will be questions, I'd like to hear expenses before I
Okay.
go back to that one.
Okay. Expenses, their predominant expenses are their personnel expenses. That's a little over $3 million. They're currently under the target, budgeted target for that. They're about 50%. But we do expect them to be under budget for their personnel expenses. And then for their supplies, of course, it was 19,000 was budgeted. They're at about halfway mark, so that's right on track. On services, they're at about the halfway track for those as well. And so I don't see any concern with their budget exceeding their budget at this point in time. For both debt service and capital, those are both related to the impact of the reversal entries from prior year accruals and adjustments related to SPIDA and lease financial transactions.
And those are the new rulings from
The new rules and
national guidelines.
these are financial entries that will get adjusted again in December.
So how does debt service figure in? Because
It's basically an entry.
The department didn't borrow money, right?
Well, for the financial reporting, they're reclassing an operating expense and showing it as partially debt service and partially capital. It's a financial transfer between, and it's all within their own funds, but it's a transfer from service line to those other lines. And it's just for financial reporting.
So I'm assuming this is going to start appearing on all the departments as we go
Well,
through the
it
year.
appears
or-
predominantly on those departments that are using subscription-based items and leases, if they lease any material equipment.
Yay.
Yay, sorry.
The expenses that actually reflect the operations are right on, they're right there. We're about halfway through the year and
Yes.
halfway through the.
Yeah, so
budget,
there isn't any concerns on any of their expenditures at this point in time. They currently have approximately 22 and a half positions. They have, as of the point in time of this, there was one vacancy, as opposed to last year about this time, they had 2 vacancies.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Bailey, could you promote me? I forgot to log in, so. Thank you. I'll get to it, just amazing. On the, you did mention that the transfers are still not really shown in here.
Right, not from general fund.
Right.
And but it's possible I can make those, I can make those adjustments on these financials. So as you can see, they receive about they're budgeted to receive about 500,000, 509,000, but their expenses are $4.4 million.
Right.
So
A
the
little bit of-
difference would be the transfer in from the general fund.
Okay. And just for further clarification, when I see the year-to-date actuals exceeding the whole year, I need an explanation as to what went off to cause that.
So they, obviously, they conservatively budgeted what they would be on the intergovernmental, that what they would be billing the state. And so we will be amending that revenue budget upward.
So that is from the Blake decision rewrites, or is this the
No.
compensation you get from the state for public defense?
The latter.
Okay,
Mhm.
and it's not very much. I mean, obviously.
Not very much.
yeah.
I want to address this and then for court, or excuse me, court.
Your microphone.
There is another grant that I applied for and got to, but I was gonna wait to discuss.
A lot closer.
Yeah,
A
a
lot
lot
closer.
closer to record. Is
You
that
can,
better?
you can hear yourself when it's,
Okay.
there you go.
Yikes, all right.
So I'm still, what materially changed that we underestimated this? Or did we underestimate? Is the rest of the year going to be zero?
I think one thing we can recall is this leasing situation we have with our current office space. We were not able to renew a 1-year lease while we figured out where the
Right.
Office of Public Defense is going to be relocated. So we've actually been paying about 160% rent
Yeah.
every month this year. So that, I think, is going to be.
And you
seen.
hadn't budgeted for that.
We had not budgeted for that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right, but that doesn't deal with the
It's on the
revenue.
revenue side.
Oh, the revenue side, I'm sorry.
I can look into it.
Okay,
I'm
thank you.
not sure.
Yeah. And typically I tend to digress a little bit. Like, what's the latest on your housing?
I'm I'm glad Mr. Rowe is here also. We've been making.
Don't forget to come a little closer until. you hear
Okay,
directly.
we actually do have a landing spot finally, so it will be in the annex building right next door to us here. We're gonna be replacing, I think it's the COG group that's currently on the second floor, as well as about 2/3 of the bottom floor. So the plan would be fully moved in by January 1. We are already making plans and drawing lines on the ground really where office desks are going to be situated. So finally, we have a place. Again, I think the commissioners will recall, I've tried to find several other county spaces for us to land, but this is the one that's going to actually work. And it's somewhat funny to me. That's where the Office of Public Defense, when first created, was located. So
Is there enthusiasm on your part and your staff's part?
there is actually great enthusiasm
Good.
now that people have seen. I've been able to, well, we toured it because we had to give them notice that we were going to walk through their office space, took pictures. So yes, there is quite a buzz about the fact we're going to have a much more law office type feeling to where we're moving.
So from a finance standpoint, does that mean you don't get hit for 8,000 a month or some such number?
Correct. Yeah, next year's financials are going to be a much prettier sight.
Yeah, and I don't know, how do we do this? Do you pay the general fund for your space or that's just,
I believe so. No?
No, there's
Good,
no,
okay,
no
thank you.
rent.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no rent out of our own fund, yes. Currently, yes, out of the general fund, we're
good, so
paying our rent.
I have to tell my spouse, she cannot charge me for the use of my office in the house that we own jointly.
Should be a tax write-off of some sort.
Yeah.
So if this would be the time to address it too, I did apply for what's called a simple possession advocacy and representation grant through state OPD. It's $100,000 grant. We are going through a training this week, but where Blake funds, we've opted out. Now basically state OPD assists Cowlitz County prior defendants with their Blake matters. This would be $100,000 that can be used and refunded to our budget line to assist and represent individuals charged with possession charges.
Okay, great.
It's always a pleasure to hear from you, Ian. How's your crystal ball with respect to OPD future? You know, the demands on your office, I think, are going to continue to increase. And at some point, we just turn the keys of the county over to you. And
That's scary.
and so do you have any insight into what might happen?
It's been a roller coaster for the 2.5 years now that I've been director. Right now, I'm on a very positive outlook. We are actually getting applications for attorneys at a higher clip than we have since I've been director. We have just hired somebody who was a law school graduate, just took the bar exam at the end of July. So my plan for office always was, there is a bit of a, like a slowly moving, but a revolving door for people who are maybe at the end of their careers handling more serious cases. And we need that influx of young attorneys just receive that used to be the lifeblood of offices like mine. And so we're seeing an increase in that, which is great. It allows us to tutor them and supervise them and train them the way we believe it should be practiced. Our defense work should be practiced. So with that, I'm actually feeling quite optimistic. I'm attending a lot of those meetings about the changes in the caseload standards that would create this basically insurmountable demand for attorneys. Those conversations, now that things are becoming more realistic of what the impact will be, are starting to actually sound reasonable in those conversations instead of doing this, what they plan right now, I think, is a yearly change, is maybe doing a change in July of next year, which most people agree would benefit everybody, including increasing applicants, both at the prosecutor's office as well as our office. But actually maybe putting a pause on the next year's to see what the actual impact is versus just changing it on a yearly basis. Before, it was just me and a couple other people from smaller counties voicing that concern, because what we're up against is larger counties which have over 100 attorneys in their public defense office. Us saying that might be a problem for you large firms, but for us, we have 14 positions for attorneys. It's not a problem, knock on wood, for us. So we're starting to actually be heard. We're starting to grow in number. So I do have some optimism. I'm still concerned. It's still something I need to continually get on my soapbox and be heard by the Supreme Court of our state, as well as the Washington State OPD. But I'm finally feeling a little bit more optimistic about it than I was maybe 4 months ago.
And I imagine you continue to have that challenge of being in a relatively smaller county and having the conflicts. So you have to constantly scramble to get those outside firms to
Yes.
contract with you to
Clark
compensate for the conflicts.
Yes, Clark County just now is forming their own Office of Public Defense, a county Office of Public Defense. They've picked who the director will be. It's still forming as he winds down his practice. But I've met with a couple of our county civil attorneys, and we're going to form a motion of understanding with them to hopefully have an official way of handling those conflicts, because yes, as these.
Oh, so they'll provide you
That
rather
is-
than having to do the
That is the
local
hope,
contracts.
yes. So I think if we can
Oh,
maybe make it a little bit more convenient for them so that preliminary hearings, they can appear via Zoom, which we got away from after COVID and the courts opened back up. I think that's going to be the answer, because we are really dealing with a small pool of attorneys, defense attorneys in county that do criminal defense work on a Class B or even a Class A felony level are all on contract with us. So, I mean, we've tapped the only resources we have. So if we can get this together with Clark County, that will greatly alleviate some, I wouldn't say friction with the court, but some issues we've been having with judges lately about what to do for conflict cases.
and of course, then there's that sense that either we become their training center or we're able to have an environment that's attractive
Yes.
to them. I mean, there's going to be always that kind of, oh man, they've got a great operation up here, or, oh man, I'd love to be in Cowlitz County.
Right. And we are seeing with the growth of Ridgefield and areas in between,
Mhm.
we're able to attract, I think, more people than just even a year ago with that. So there's some positive movement in that way. Not everybody that graduates law school or is in their first 5 years of practice wants to live in a city as big as Vancouver.
Yeah.
So we do appeal to those applicants as well.
Great.
Yeah, we had a question the other day and I didn't have a great answer on it because it's been a while. I chatted with you, backlog. And last time we had chatted, it sounded like we were working through. So can you touch on that just a little bit?
Definitely, yes. I didn't bring Ms. Michael Buss posts, but there's actually been, thankfully, a downturn in charging. More misdemeanors, but less felonies, which really are what the backlog consisted of. We've really focused in 2024 of trial advocacy, preparing our attorneys to be better trial advocates, because with the logjam, what it was were cases that negotiations couldn't be made on a plea. The fact patterns is the nicest way to put it, but the situation involved with the cases were difficult to really present to a jury and hope for a good outcome. But nonetheless, by putting our emphasis on preparing cases for trial, it's actually leading to a lot more cases resolving quicker. So in the last 4 months, we are resolving more cases than are being filed. And when we spoke about it last, I told you that's the magic bullet. I mean, the way to fix this is to resolve more than are being filed. I mean, the math is simple on that front. You're going to then eventually catch up. But the backlog in our bubble is being talked about much less. It's occasional, you'll see a 2021 case, but it's from this time a year ago, it's much less. I can't put a number to it, but it's just few and far between that you actually see something that's
Yeah.
3 years old.
So if I answer to him that we've seen some significant improvement, it looks like it'll continue that way, I'd be
Yes,
on target.
I think that's the consensus from the judges, the prosecutors and defense. We're moving on. A lot of the cases recently that have been in trial are 2023, 2024 cases. So that's also indicative of the backlog being in the past.
Perfect, thank you.
An ancillary question, your office handles misdemeanors on up to through the felonies. Do you have a sense of the number of cases as opposed to hours that fall into the category? Like what percentage are Class A, Class B, Class C misdemeanors?
Yes,
Just ballpark.
ballpark. So we just had to do a worksheet for the projected changes in the caseload standards and Class A felonies. So that's your most serious crimes, first degree felonies, murders and so forth. That's a very small number of cases. It's less than 5% of the cases we're dealing with. The vast majority are misdemeanors. We're over 55% of what gets filed by the prosecutor's office are simple assaults, thefts, less than $750, trespass, things of that nature.
Those are all misdemeanors?
Those are all misdemeanors, yes.
You mean if Rick comes over and hits me over the head, that's just a misdemeanor?
Depending on the injury inflicted, yes, that's,
Wow.
and again, what he hits you with. Depending on what he hits you with, that could make it a felony too, but.
Now, there's some that would probably give me a ribbon.
Well, we won't go.
Right, so the vast majority are misdemeanors. Then in between, violent crime is down currently in our county. We're dealing, I think it's been pretty consistent, but most felonies are property crimes. So thefts greater than $750 in value, or thefts that occur with an assault, simple assault, but nonetheless, if I push you and take your cell phone, we now have a felony. So
If I look at now, not in terms of count, but in terms of hours, is there a multiplier like a Class A is 10 times a misdemeanor? Or is there a rule of thumb that helps you?
there is, and that's what we're up against with this change in caseload standards, because just because it's a Class B felony, what's being argued by these larger counties is simply because it's a Class B felony, well, then it requires 120 hours. And what I am saying, and other people from small counties are saying, is that is such a wild exaggeration of taking these as a case by case, what you need to do. Because if it's a theft of greater value, catalytic converters used to be a common thing that were stolen. Okay, so if that's an expensive item, if it's stolen, it's a felony. But if that person can return it, pay back some sort of fee and get into drug court, that will take an attorney at most 10 hours of consultation, filing paperwork, and court appearances. If you go to trial on that case, sure, you might work that case for up to 80 hours specifically to that case. So it's such a case by case system, but what they're saying is we need to change the caseload standards because every one of those cases should require 80 to 120 hours. Well, then if an attorney has too many cases, they're not giving that 80 and 120. Well, I only spent 8 hours on that case, so I don't need, that shouldn't limit my caseload. I could accomplish that in 2 weeks. So it's frustrating. There is a rubric they use, yes. And I totally am in agreement with it for murder cases and very serious sex crimes and other things. But when you You can't do a rule of thumb so much.
A lot of those rules of thumb depend on what the distribution looks like. If it's a normal Gaussian, you can do a lot, but
Right.
these things, we don't have enough numbers anyhow to make something like that.
No.
The 2022 employees, more or less, that you have, there's a 1-to-1 ratio between a lawyer and a staff support, or?
Not currently, no. We have, not counting myself, we have 13 attorneys on staff. We have 7 support staff, not counting my office. So it's a 2-to-1 ratio.
Yeah.
We have 2 paralegals as well. We basically separate the paralegals between felony court, superior court, and misdemeanor court, district court. The new standards want us to have something closer to a 1-to-1 ratio, but then again, it's the same kind of math that if I had double my support staff, I'd have double the amount of people sitting there half the time without something
Yeah.
specific to do.
Investigators, you have, you hire them as you need them.
We hire them as we needed out of office. I don't think that's something I'd ever ask the county until required to by the Supreme Court. That's not something I think I would ever ask I'd always just work that into my budget because they're not needed on every case. So it's social workers the same. So when I first started as director, we had no paralegals, and I thought that was a need. That was definitely something we needed. The new standards are going to require at least 2 social workers for an office of our size, 1.5. Social workers for an office of our size currently, and 2 with the change in the standards. That's also something that we've always gone out of office for when needed, because same thing. It's just, if there was a need there, I would be the first person saying, this is something we need a budget for this, and this is why. But
My experience on that social work kind of thing is that if you hire somebody, like you say, and there'll be idle moments, that'll get a creation of, well, you really need more because you're not covering this or that. In other words, I really appreciate that you're holding that line. You cross that line, and I think it's not going to end up well.
yeah, so I just have to, the best I can do and what I am doing is continuing to attend the Zoom meetings. I did see Commissioner Mortensen in one of them, and we do have an audience with the Supreme Court, somewhat of an informal voicing of our position on it. I've also been reaching out to other smaller county Office of Public Directors to see if we can kind of get some form of a block to show up to these things and show numbers, at least in that sense, that there's a collective of us that think this is going to push us in the wrong direction, but we're up against the King counties, the Pierce counties, the Spokane counties.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Good to see you.
Good seeing you
Always
too.
appreciate your time. Water Sewer Department.
Did we want to deal with the auditor's issue? Do we have you on here? No,
Yeah,
we
we
got
have
you on
elections.
3.
Is-
Okay. I thought you had an issue.
So when he sees you, you have an issue?
That's
She's
what,
probably-
it's true, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I don't think you're a problem
They
at
don't
all.
call her Bad News Carolyn for
Look
nothing.
at Dennis buttering up in his last few months.
Okay, we have, we have 2 financials related to water sewer, and the first one is their regular operating account. They have revenues of a little over 4 million, 2.5, basically 2.5 million per year. And goods and services, this is where most of their customer billing transactions reside in, and we're at a little over half the year. And so their target is for just a little bit higher, closer to about 60%. They're at 53%, but that's primarily because your July billings are expected to be received more in August and in the next coming 30 days. So I don't see any issues for meeting budget. I believe they're well on track on the revenues.
And I think you've mentioned to us before that the departments are all going to have higher expenses the first 6 months because those January once a year charges
Right.
kind of
right.
skews everything. So
Right. But on the revenues, I think they're in good form here, and they're on track. It just shows a little bit below what we would target as of through 7 months, but I think that's just due to a little bit of lag in receiving the billings.
Then
Right.
I'd also just like to pop in, talk about, at the beginning of the year, we also accrue back about a month
Right.
and a half worth of revenue into the prior year for our November and December billings. So there's also a lag there. So we'll see that accrual at the end of 24 as well.
Can you remind me how many people do we have on our systems? About 1,000? Okay.
Okay, and we'll move on to expenses if that's okay. So for their expenses, they have about $900,000 worth of personnel expenses. That's salaries and benefits. And they're right on, pretty much, they're close to being on track. They're about 50% to budget right now. They should be a little bit higher, but they do have, as of right now, they have 1 vacancy. But I don't anticipate there'll be any issues with them staying on track with their budget. There's supplies, they're on track there. Services, they're a little bit below target on their services. And then on their transfers, they make their transfers towards the first quarter of the year. So they've done all of their transfers for the year, and that was right on budget. So.
In relation to a question Commissioner Mortensen asked on personnel prior year and this year's target, there's a pretty good gap there. I don't see, doesn't look like we were much different in personnel.
On the numbers of personnel, no, there's last year a total of 6 personnel. Does that sound right? And I think
Yeah, last year at this point in time, it looks like we were about 340, and this year we're about 200,000 more.
So also, we've had that open position. It's an engineering position that's been open for about 18 months. We're still trying to hire that. That would account for a large portion of that. I'm not sure on the prior year difference here. I would
Yeah,
expect that to be higher.
yeah, current year they're at 446, and prior year they were at 340 on personnel. No. Oh. Yeah, last year, I'm not sure. I can go back
I
and
don't know if
double
we
check
had,
that.
I don't know if you had vacant positions or what.
I don't know. That does look odd, that it showed that there were only 51% of budget for the entire year.
Yeah, because it doesn't have a whole lot of employees, the number seems,
Skewed.
yeah.
So, Sean, remind me again that that $750,000 transfer, that goes into the reserves. That's what we build up the reserves for.
Yes,
I
sir.
thought, I thought it was, kind of interesting with 1,000 customers, 1,000 households. They're paying about $200 a month for sewer and water. It depends. Some people only get the sewer or only get the water, then others get sewer and water. But that's kind of the average, and it makes it kind of easy to figure that out. But you've got a chunk of change that is set aside for the reserves. That's to help pay for the big projects when the repairs need to be made, and because there's no really other source of revenue for a system of only 1,000 people. I mean, that's a tight budget, and
our infrastructure is aging infrastructure. You know, we get systems when they fail. So it's always a challenge to make sure those are funded, and you guys have helped us out significantly with our projects for those ARPA dollars as well coming out of that fund.
Yeah.
with the two exceptions, I think, well, with the one major exception, and that is, of course, the Tootle sewer system. And that was engineered from the beginning by the county because we required that as a condition of development, particularly as the east shore of Silver Lake developed. I mean, they made that decision back in probably about 30 years ago. Very controversial at that time because that was the first sewer system out in an urban area. In Lexington, they had to have a special sewer district created to provide the sewer service, right? Beacon Hill.
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
But they didn't follow that model. But it's been successful, and that's probably the healthiest of the finances. Because you got a lot more people that are kicking in to
Mhm.
support that particular system, a sewer and water system.
Yes, sir.
And thank goodness for Castle Rock that supplies us with the water, right? I mean, that's a huge element of the design.
Switching a little bit off the finance, was it last year that we should have completed replacing the meters on some projects? Do you remember what that was about, Susan?
Good news for me, if I look at the timer, I have 6 seconds. So I'm not sure, we just received ARPA funding to replace all of our meters that we're just getting started on now. I don't remember
Is
any.
that the one I'm thinking about?
It
I
could
know we had
be.
a gentleman come and he spoke fairly well, giving us some engineering details, and we had to approve replacing the meters.
Yeah, that's possibly what it was. It's about a $500,000 project that we're getting started
Yeah,
on.
that sounds about right. And you were talking about the leaking in the systems and
Yes.
that kind of stuff.
Yes.
Okay, and hasn't yet begun?
No, this was approved July, I believe, somewhere around then, and
This July?
this July. Mhm.
It's time for me to go.
This July, and we're working on, did the RFP go out or the request for the purchase?
I believe it's out now. Yeah.
Yes, because I think it was approved before, sometime in July. We got that all worked out so we can purchase it, and the computer system that we'll need to read them.
And they're one of the, if I remember correctly, one of the justifications for going forward with that is to zero in on what appears to be a fairly hefty leakage in the system. But we don't have an efficient system to monitor that.
Yes,
And, like 25% of the volume being, was it that high? I can't remember the number, but that's what.
it was a high
reminded me.
number. I don't know if it was quite 25, but it was pretty darn close. And so, yes, this will give us a better monitoring of that. One of the other things that I've been talking with the water sewer crew to tighten in is people pulling water from hydrants, tightening in our hydrant meter system because we're not 100% sure is it all being reported? Because if you don't report it, that's a loss in your system. So that is one of the things we want to tighten up on also.
So the fact that we're relying on ARPA, one-time only funds for something that should be part of a systematic program is just another example where you have a small number of customers, you can't generate a lot of revenue. I mean, the $750 a year, $750,000 a year going into reserves doesn't go very far when you're making major repairs. I mean, and the other major repair that I wanted to ask about required congressional funding, and that's Shadow Mountain. Where are we on that?
So the Shadow Mountain design is at 90%. I am working on, and we're working on obtaining all our easements. I'm working on getting you guys the documentation to sign to secure that congressional funding. That should be coming up very soon. So this project, we are anticipating advertising October, November.
So both of these projects with funding from outside sources
Mhm.
aren't reflected in the department budget, not even in the reserves. Will that be brought in at some time, or do we just fund those things
reserves.
separately?
Yeah, it's in the reserves and
Okay,
we'll be talking about that budget
Okay.
next.
fair enough.
If you're ready, are you ready to look at that one?
Wait, I'm confused. I think those are totally excellent questions, but this report doesn't reflect any of that. But then you just said something at the end, it will be showing in
So
the reserves?
there's two funds. There's one for operating expenses. And then there's another fund that's their reserve, which has primarily their capital expenses.
Yeah, I think I got ahead of ourselves, because there's the day-to-day operations, which is what the first handout was.
Right, which is what
And then the
we're,
big term projects.
is on the reserve.
So part of the day-to-day operations includes a transfer of funds collected month by month. That
To help fund capital
$750,000 goes into
projects.
that reserve fund, which is set up for the big projects.
But in this case, we're going I think I understand it. I'm just wondering how best to report it.
Other financing sources, if I read the next document. So we're ahead to the.
And I think on this, on certainly the meter project, if we didn't get external funding, I would think we still have to do it out of the reserves we have, right?
Yes.
Shadow Mountain is a different question.
So all of our capital projects are all going to be run out of the 40703 fund, the water sewer reserve.
Oh, I like it when you throw numbers out like that. The entry in this document that says capital 25,000, how do I read that? That was something you spent?
That's going to be for small equipment over our capital threshold.
Okay.
So it's like for pump replacements at pump stations, like our sewer lift stations. It's for them to go out and buy a small pump to replace it. That's just more of an on stock item versus a large project.
So as of right now, do we know that we have anything like that?
I believe they replaced one lift station pump earlier this year.
But it doesn't show here.
Yeah, it has to meet the threshold. Our capitalization threshold's $15,000.
Oh, okay, thank you. Now, it still has to get out of someplace.
Yeah, if it was less than the capitalization threshold, it would show up in the services line as repairs and maintenance services.
Oh, got it. All right. Isn't it terrible how hard it is to train the board?
Sean was going to say it's hard to train the engineer too, so.
She calls you propeller heads. You all know where that comes from? In the comic books way back when, the nerdy kid wore a baseball cap with a propeller head on it. And hence the term for propeller heads for engineers. It's tough for the board having to train the public.
Well, I might have to get Susan one of those hats too, just for fun.
I have a conductor's hat, for engineer.
Would you like to talk about the Water Sewer Reserve Fund next? So on the Water Sewer Reserve Fund, we have revenues. We have intergovernmental budgeted at $1 million. We haven't had any of those cost reimbursement projects yet. And then we had miscellaneous where we've exceeded the budget. So we will be amending that to carry us through the rest of the year. That is primarily investment income on the fund balance. Other financing sources is related to transfers in, and those are primarily ones that were related to fully budgeting ARPA funds, which we don't expect to receive all of those funds this year. So there'll probably be a budget amendment necessary on that as well. So that's the largest revenue item is $7.6 million.
Then I'll just add on to, within that other financing sources is going to be that $750,000 transfer from the operating fund into our reserve on the annual basis to help fund those capital projects.
And on the expenditure side, that's where you'll see the major capital expenditures. So in addition to budgeting $7,600,000 for revenues, we also budgeted $7,600,000 for capital expenses. And like I said, most of those are the ARPA projects. And so some of that's come in already and including the transfer in from the operating fund to be expended on port projects. So that's it.
I think a lot of the projects are that list you give us every so often are in there, yeah.
Yes, that is that project list of those projects, and they're all getting close.
Close without the D.
Close without, I'm sorry.
Without the D, not closed, but
No,
close.
yeah, close to going out to bid so I can start spending that $7.6 million and spending that dollar amount down.
You just don't know the problems that a hearing impaired and speech impaired people have.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Elections. Yeah. Morning.
Okay, there's actually a lot going on in elections. We certified tomorrow, but I wanted to talk to you about something that you might get questions about or something that you noticed last Friday when we published results, and then some kind of big news statewide going on. So this election was a bit unusual in that we actually had a large amount of ballots on election day. Quite a few on Monday, but really a crazy amount of ballots on election day, which is unusual. The nice thing about vote by mail is that we can process those ballots and get them ready for tabulation. We have 18 days to do that, so we're not scrambling at the last minute to get results up. But this election, we had a very large number of ballots that we were trying to get through prior to Election Day. So one of the things that you see in larger counties like King and Pierce and Snohomish is you see votes changing. And people may say, well, I understand additional votes coming in, but somebody should never lose a vote, right? But that's incorrect. And in those larger counties, the reason why you see that is because they deal with what Cowlitz County dealt with in this primary every election. They have such a large number of ballots to deal with that they have to rely on this grace period after the election prior to certification to review and correct those votes. So this election, we have a redundant process that we use in elections. First, we have our opening board that is made up of party people working in teams. They do a visual inspection of every ballot, which alerts us to any discrepancies, anything that the tabulator wouldn't be able to catch on its own. Well, we know that we're all human and we make mistakes. So we have another process that we go through where we do a visual on-screen double check. And we typically do that prior to uploading results in Cowlitz County. And typically, that does not result in Cowlitz County making any changes. Our opening board is very good at what they do, and it's very, very rare that we will come across something that they have missed in their manual inspection. Well, this election, the ballot was long, and they missed about a dozen issues. And we didn't have time to do our review prior to getting results out. We wanted to get the results out. It was a judgment call on our behalf. And I brought props actually. I wanted to point out this specific scenario in law because, the tabulator is looking for ink in a target area. That it's not intelligent. It does exactly what you tell it to do. However, I'm hoping you guys can see this. This is actually the poster board that our opening board is looking for. And on this ballot, you can see that somebody filled in an oval, and then they made a correction according to law. They crossed it out. However, they did not make another choice. So the tabulator will see this as a vote, and it's clearly not a vote, and that's in state law. I have directions by state law that I have to deselect this as a vote. So I don't know if people can see that, but our opening board missed roughly 12 of these. And so when we finally got time to do our re-review, we caught them, which was last week, and you saw some significant changes. And the reason I say it is significant is because last week, before we uploaded new results, we were looking at a recount. And the results were really close in these teeny tiny PCO races. So specifically in Magnolia Precinct and also Laurel Precinct, and actually in Dennis Weber's race as well. I don't know if you noticed or not, but even a correction of 1 or 2 votes in this exact scenario, was big news because we were looking at a recount in Magnolia. And because of that correction, no longer a recount. So
So
just
it's not a tie?
no longer a tie. So it was unfortunate, but in the future, we will revert back to our normal policy and we'll just wait on results because we don't want to cause alarm or any distrust, obviously. So I figured if anybody was going to get questions, it would be you. So I wanted to make sure to bring that up first thing. So now the big news. Came into an email this morning, which I've been watching this race closely, Commissioner of Public Lands. If you haven't noticed, the spread between the second highest and third highest candidates has entered manual recount range. So there hasn't been a statewide recount in a primary since 1960. And a statewide recount in any election, I guess, since 2004. So right now, that, as we say, certification is tomorrow, so we'll know for sure at 5 o'clock tonight. But it looks right now that we will be setting a statewide date for a manual recount for the primary.
Which means
Every county.
running the ballots through the machines again, or?
No, this is a manual recount, which is a different threshold. So if you're less than 0.5%, it's a machine recount. But if you're less than 0.25%, it's a manual recount. And we're currently in manual recount range. And we've watched, rather than that spread growing, we've watched that spread continue to shrink as we continue to upload results. So if that trend continues, it'll get even closer. So at canvassing board, we will have to set a date to conduct a manual recount, which means opening all of the boxes, pulling out the paper ballots, and literally tallying by hand, one ballot at a time, manual.
And the canvassing board does that?
The canvassing board wouldn't that be nice? Rick, I think that'd be a perfect job for you.
I just about used the big hammer on you.
Now, I just learned that was an assault earlier today, so I think that would qualify as a felony.
Putting the canvassing board in a hand recoil, that's an assault.
But
The canvassing board does oversee the process.
manual recounts, they scare me just because I cannot count, like doing inventory. I've done inventory before and I get a spread of answers.
Yeah, you're exactly right, which is why we do everything in teams and we keep it very, very simple. So we're going batch by batch. So it's not a bulk of ballots and you're tallying one at a time. You're reconciling batch by batch as you go.
So
If
you're
I-
utilizing the opening board folks, the folks that did the original, you have a whole new crew.
Yeah, we use office staff for
Oh,
that.
office staff, okay.
Yeah, and since it's a statewide recount, I mean, we've had several local recounts, but since this is a statewide recount, we actually must submit all of our procedures to the state where they review them, make sure that we're all following the same procedure and conducting it on the same date.
So if I do a batch and I get a number X and Dennis does a batch and he gets the same number X, we go on to the next batch.
Well, procedures say that we stop and we recount with a different team. So there would be a second recount and we would recount that batch with a different team just to make sure.
Right, isn't that what I just described? I
I'm
counted,
not sure.
I got a number, he counted, he's another team, he got a number.
Oh,
Okay, and the numbers, two possible outcomes. They're the same, we move on. They're not the same, then we do it again.
yes.
And we do it again and again until we come up with the consistent answer.
Well, we do it twice. On the second, it is what it is.
But is it
The
his
second
number or my number?
consistent, yeah, the second consistent number.
Yeah,
So.
but you do it as often as you have to until you find agreement, right?
Correct.
Okay. So the recount has partisan overtones because it determines whether there are two Republicans facing each other or if one is a Democrat and one's a Republican. So if you're using office staff, how do you explain how it's not a partisan weight to the counting?
Except in this case, there is a Democrat that has the most votes, right?
No, it's Jamie Herrera Butler has the most votes. She's the leading
Oh, so it is
Republican in
what
the
you
race.
said. Okay.
Yeah, the second and third place candidates are Sue Peterson and Dave Up the Grove.
Up the Grove, yep.
So to
And
answer
Sue
your,
had been in second place in the initial results, and then Up to Grove, because he's actually a legislator or a county executive. Anyway, he's from King County, and the big population counties are coming in late, and he boosted up. Although I understand it's really tightened.
it is very tight.
Yeah.
I did a recount calculator on it. It's a difference of 951 votes today statewide. So like we say, we'll do a
And is she
last
still in third place, 900 votes behind him?
951. Mhm. Which is a very small number statewide. When you're talking, wish I would have worn my glasses.
I think
Showing
we
my
had a
age now.
governor's race a couple of years back that was about 180 votes apart.
A couple of years back, yeah. 1,894,883 votes total statewide. So 951 is a small number from that. Exciting times.
In
But to
that
answer
case-
your question, Dennis, the recount is always open for observers. And of course, first and foremost, we have the candidates or their designees represented, and then we have equal in-party members for representation as well.
In that case, do you also do a recount of the lead vote getter also?
Nope.
It's only the two that are closest to each other.
Yeah. So exciting times. And we always have observers for recounts, no matter how small. We
And
always
it's all
have.
televised as well, right?
Have what?
The television is on.
If we conduct it in that room, we have not decided it. I'm going to have to look at the number of boxes because we want the whole process to be very transparent, which means every box of ballots that we've stored for the election, we want them out on the table. We want to show observers the breaking of the seal, confirmation of the seal numbers, removing the batches. It's likely that we'll do it in the GMR, so it wouldn't be on camera in the GMR. Unless we did some sort of live stream Zoom maybe session. I'll look into it to see if we have that capability, but only in the conference room would be able to do something like that. Or in elections, but our room isn't big enough down there.
I think that having it televised gives the overflow room there's always plenty of people can watch and observe if it's televised, but I understand there are practical limitations. You can't do everything in that conference room on the first floor.
Yeah, and you really want to make sure that you have the room to make sure ballots don't cross over from one box to the next box as you're reconciling.
Yep. Great.
Is that called a King County hop?
Won't comment on that one. You have any
All right.
questions for me?
Anything we can do to help?
Well, like I say, I might be looking at Rick's schedule as an official member of the canvassing board. I think his first recount in elections should be memorable.
And
How much work does a canvassing board have this time?
It's significantly less for our regular canvassing board meeting. The new, good news for Rick. The new signature verification laws went into effect this primary. Our number is drastically less than previous elections. So that review will go very quickly. But we will have procedure changes that we'll need to present to the canvassing board in a public meeting for adoption. So that'll take a little bit of time, but it'll be quick. Then we'll have to schedule an additional canvassing board meeting after the recount to certify the amended abstract votes after a recount, so. But tomorrow's meeting will be fairly quick and painless.
And our chairman should be aware that Mr. Mortensen could serve as his substitute because he's not on the
I
ballot.
had a substitute and then that substitute ran for PCO.
I know. Moment
That's
of
great.
weakness.
Once again, the big hammer.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Carolyn. We'll just move right into agenda review, Public Works.
Dennis, you had to quit smoking.
I know.
Wait till all the calls you're gonna get now. I didn't know you smoked.
No, we had another good dose of grandchildren this weekend. So
Oh, yeah. No, yep.
So good morning. Susan Eugenius, County Engineer. Public Works has 2 items on the agenda this week. The first item is on the consent agenda, and it's a call for bid for call it reinforced polyethylene geomembrane for the landfill. This is the material that we use to tarp the landfill. We constantly are tarping as we cover face, and in the winter, we need to have a smaller surface opened per our permit. So this is just a normal business. We need more tarps.
this is the one that's Xed with the cables to weight it down.
Yes.
Okay.
So the other item we have is also fairly straightforward. It's a resolution to establish the Coal Creek Road Improvement Project. This project will run from milepost 1.44 to 2.0. It will correct various vertical and horizontal curves. At this point, we have a funding of $1.25 million from the Surface Transportation Block Grant and the Carbon Reduction Program funds. We are also in the process of applying to CRAB to pick up another $1 million so that the local contribution will be about $300,000. This seems to be the best way to fund these type of projects.
And the impact statement includes, what is it, tire dust?
Tire dust, yes, that will be addressed when we're doing the design because we will be adding widened shoulders. So we're adding more surface area of potential travel area. So we'll have to address the tire dust in our stormwater treatment.
Come on, Dennis, stop beating me up on that.
No, it's not you, Ed. No, it's the unrelenting unreasonableness of
Yeah.
rules and regulations.
Actually, yeah. That's
So
for the
I-
bicycles.
So I am a little curious about this concept of curves on a road. I can get the horizontal curves, vertical curves?
Vertical curves. You're,
Oh, up and
so
you
when you
can't
go,
see over
when
the
you
next
can't see
rise.
over or you sag down
Oh,
and your
okay.
headlights can't be seen. So the vertical and horizontal curve requirements also, so the
Okay.
visibility. So also not just your headlights, so that when you come up and over, you don't hit the baby deer and then get posted on Facebook as being a criminal for killing baby deers
Or bicyclists.
or bicyclists that wandered out of the bike
Well, the
lane.
thing for a bicyclist, when they get down into the hollow, they feel that cold air. It's like-
So, The end of, the lower end of Coal Creek Road is Pacific, kind of Pacific Way or um, and then there's the next sort of big intersection is with is it Eufaula Heights?
I believe so. I can't read the map. I didn't bring my glasses, so I handed it to Sean because he's young enough. He still doesn't need them.
So this repair is towards the intersection with Eufaula Heights? Is that?
Yes, and then ends just before the Stewart Creek Road.
Okay, okay, oh, right, in that area, okay.
And where the location we're ending it is just prior to a large fish barrier culvert. But instead of using, excuse me, a transportation that is good money for corridors, we decided we'd run a corridor where we didn't have $1 million fish barrier to remove. And then once this project is done, we'll look at doing fish barrier money to replace that and then moving.
Stewart Creek is the.
Yes.
Barrier, oh, that's
So-
pretty, that's a pretty good sized creek though, isn't
It is, and that's why we decided to stop short of that. Use the transportation corridor money for doing good transportation corridor and then start looking into Brian Abbott Fish Barrier or Protect to leverage our funds that way. So that would be directed by fish money. The goal, our long-term goal in my head, and it won't happen before I retire, but we're working the two ends of Delameter and Coal Creek to make that a nice corridor all the way through as we develop. I think that corridor will be used more, so.
Great. Thank you.
I thought you were going to complete all that before you retired.
No. Not unless I'm working to the ripe old age of 108 or something ridiculous.
Oh, then it'll be done before Sean. retires.
Maybe before Sean retires, yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks. Finance.
Kathy Funk Baxter, Finance Director. So tomorrow we have a public hearing for a budget amendment. I've given you the attachment A, which is the details of that budget amendment. The first item is $10,000 coming from our general fund, and that's in order to provide an inter-fund loan for the cafe food service fund. And then, which is, we will also have a resolution for that loan, and that loan will be repaid within, basically will be paid before the end of 2025, this second year. So then the opioid funds, we have a budget amendment of $25,000. That fund has been receiving revenue, as you know, and all of the revenue has not been budgeted as any expense yet up to this point. And so this is the $25,000 for the feasibility study for a behavioral health facility at the juvenile facility, potentially. And so that's what that budget amendment is, pulling it from fund balance and putting it in an expenditure line.
That $25,000, is that the one that goes to, is it ETA?
ETA, however they
ETA.
said it.
That are working on that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
And we have a workshop.
this Wednesday on it.
It's on
Yeah.
this Wednesday this
Yeah.
week, okay.
Yeah. And this will allow us to pay those invoices for that feasibility study. And then the cafe food service is a new fund. And so we're setting up some expenditure lines for carrying out that for between now and the end of the year, various expenses. And then we also are showing revenue coming in for that cafe. These numbers were put together a couple of months ago, so they're probably a little overstated. But in all, we don't anticipate that the food service operations will actually do a little bit better than break even or at break even and provide enough money to start paying back that interfund loan as well.
This is trying to put some service back into the Hall of Justice.
This is for the Hall of Justice only at this time. And then the last item is for IT, and last budget amendment, we amended the budget to show some additional revenue transfer in that comes from doc recording fees. And we did not adjust the fund balance for the offset, and so this is correcting that for $40,000.
It's from document recording fees?
From the auditor's office, a portion of what they collect is to help with the laserfish.
Oh, it's the part of the document recording fees that don't go to.
Right, for
Almost no-
archival
Oh,
purposes,
okay.
specifically are used for archivals of state records. So that's it. And we will be doing a call for budget amendment, a more thorough budget amendment to cover most departments, and those we're expecting to do that budget amendment in October. But this is a interim budget amendment so that we can get the cafe up and running, basically.
So on our agenda, you mentioned a motion just to approve the loan.
There'll be a public hearing to approve this budget amendment as
Oh, a
well.
public hearing will have a motion to
Yeah,
approve the.
so it'll
budget.
be
Okay.
two actual resolutions during the budget hearing. One for the budget amendment and one for the interfund loan.
And then something about Washington State County's risk pool. We're canceling out a resolution.
Oh, I'm gonna let Shelley present
that's-
that to you. We're gonna let our risk manager bring that one forward.
Right
That's
before
the
that,
next one.
we'll probably get some oohs and ahs on the big number of vouchers tomorrow. It's just
Yeah, we missed
the way they
asking
come in.
Carolyn about
We missed
that.
last
Yeah.
week, didn't we?
Yeah,
I'm
last week
trying
we
to
didn't
recall. I
have.
don't think we saw any last week
That's-
because
I
somebody would
believe
probably
so.
say, wow. Yeah, okay.
And there's only a little tiny amount for payroll, so there's some hefty claims that have come through.
Yeah.
And Shelley will go over the resolution that we're bringing forward for the risk pool.
Okay.
Okay, good morning, Commissioners. Shelley Pierce, Risk Manager. I just have a single item for the agenda tomorrow. We're just rescinding resolution number 23-050 and continuing our relationship with the Washington State County Risk Pool and the related appointments and designations of each county member. That's it.
So that's appointing you to represent us?
Correct. So it's removing Victoria, the old risk manager, and inputting my name, and then all of the other designees. Just updating email addresses and extensions and phone numbers so that the risk pool has all contact information and data accurate. Any questions?
No,
Okay,
that's good.
that's it. Thank you.
I think that's it for tomorrow, right? Yeah, we have everybody. Okay. A couple miscellaneous, we talked about canvas board. Tomorrow I have that at 1:00. We're also, you're having interviews. And so I will miss some of those afternoon interviews, but I've been looking at the questions we have to ask are all on the applications, and I can review the tape if I need to be, but I have to be at canvas board. I had, we will see at some point in time, I had Bill Fashing come in and talk with me last week on COG. They're looking at a new building, and they'll be asking us to look at the possibility of providing a loan to fund a new building instead of leasing a building. And so we might see that at some point in time, just so you're kind of aware. They're actually looking at two things. They want to buy the building. That probably makes some sense instead of leasing. And if we can help them with not buying it, but doing the financing of it, which they'd pay us back. And they're looking at the possibility of a one-time assessment to redo air conditioning and stuff like that. So we may see a couple things come in, just so you're both aware. Had a question come up, and it wasn't actually here, but because I know a little bit about it, the hotel at the expo, somebody, I think, had asked it, maybe it was Longview's meeting, asked about where that's at, and the original people that were looking at that backed out of that. Were you all aware of that? That the original folks that were going to build that backed out, and so they're looking for new vendors. I've given them a couple people that they're talking to one today, and they've been talking to another. So they're looking at another group that may take that up and do that.
There's a time pressure on that.
There is a time pressure, and I don't know what that is right in front of me.
I think we've exceeded it once before.
I think 25 is the
25, maybe the latest one.
Yeah, so there's a meeting, PFD has a meeting on Wednesday. Maybe I don't know if I'll be able to get over to it, but I guess it wouldn't surprise me, depending on how those talks come, that we may have another request to move that. I could be totally wrong on that, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know all the nuances. I know when the people from the hotel group that said they did want in, it was pretty clear to me when they presented, they were looking for us for the money to build a hotel.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If the private enterprise will not pay for their hotel there, then I don't think we should be interested.
Yeah. So they have, I know they have 3 different groups that, a couple that I've been familiar with in my past life are talking with them, and then another group is talking with them. So I know there's 3 that they're having some conversations with and trying to move it forward.
That's probably the best news I've heard in a long time, because I had no confidence in the group that presented.
Right. That's the miscellaneous stuff I had.
So just continuing on that, Dennis, in order to get to where we are now on that pending the hotel, there was a lot of machination, trading properties, looking at valuations, and the deal was if the hotel wasn't built by a certain period of time, that whole thing would be undone.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm looking at how do you undo some of those land swaps? I guess it's all on paper, so
Yeah.
it'd be a mess.
It would be a mess. My hope is something gets worked out, because I still believe that project has merit over there.
Agreed.
Would like to see it
Agreed.
come to
Yeah.
fruition. Yeah.
It's a little bit like the proverbial chicken and the egg.
Yeah.
They've got some great plans to expand the programming, which would increase the demand. But you can't get people to come in unless you've got the hotel. And the hotel can't come in unless they're guaranteed
Yeah.
a lot more events and, yeah.
I think that's a key
It is.
part. Yeah. Anything else? Did we have, do we actually have any HR stuff at 11? She is here. You want to take care of this now? Can you do that? Okay.
Good morning, Jessica Warren, Human Resources. I do have one request and then an executive session. My request comes from the prosecuting attorney's office. He's requesting to start a deputy prosecuting attorney at step 4. This attorney's moving here from California, so he won't be able to start until November, but he'd like to make the offer at step 4.
And that's
I'm okay
based-
with that.
And that's based on previous experience that they bring to the job.
Correct, yes.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay, thank you. And then I have a request for an executive session for collective bargaining.
And this says potential litigation, but we're collective bargaining.
Mine's collective bargaining, yes.
Okay. So that's a different one. So yours is collective bargaining and estimated.
10 minutes.
Okay. So we will adjourn to executive session for collective bargaining, estimated around 10 minutes. Okay. Okay, back from executive session, no decisions were made. We don't have anything till 11. So we just will recess till 11.
Sounds good.
Yeah, she is. All right, we're back in 11 o'clock business. Looks like we have executive session, potential litigation and risk. Shelley, any idea on time?
How much time do you think we're gonna need?
If 15, okay. Okay, we will move to executive session, potential litigation, 15 minutes.
board is extending the executive session for a period of 10 minutes until 11:26.
Okay, back from executive session on potential litigation. No decisions were rendered. I don't see any other business. We will adjourn for the day. Convene tomorrow morning.